reported to the cloud this time. All right. Episode 2, or 1, the first one is 0.
Of whatever this is.
Whatever this is. Conversation about showing up. The last time we talked a little bit about the book, Trust as a Technology. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday that was very helpful for me in kind of framing it, because there's a confusion about what do I mean by that is subtle to distinguish. And what I said was that it's not so much about trust between me and you. There's a way that the word trust is understood through the linguistic form and like, oh, do I trust you?
Right.
And there's a deeper aspect of it. It's a bidirectional kind of a thing. It's a balanced process of trying to figure out what's working and what's not, and how do I tell? Do I trust myself to know what's trustworthy? Do I trust myself to know when I'm out of alignment? And that, oh, wait, hold on, I think I'm missing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if I was to say to somebody that I didn't trust them, I might mean that they might betray me, or I'm afraid that they might betray me. But then there's an interesting thing of like what you brought up of there's trust in, can I look at this betrayal? Like, what do I mean by somebody betraying me? Oh, well, I expected them to be honest and they lied or something. And so there's something there for me. It's really subtle. It's hard to point to. But there's a way that I can be around people that have different values than me. That doesn't rely on them to have the same values as me, to have the same beliefs.
Right.
So I can like go into the world and interact with all kinds of people.
Yeah. Somebody today. Oh yeah. I don't know if you've heard of the glass bead games. There's a fellow that I know who's put together. There's a book. Herman Hesse wrote a book called The Glass Bead Game. And a person has made an actual interactional game that has some flavor similar to circling. It's a relational practice of turn taking in a kind of a more semi-poetic, semi-artistic flow process and around a topic, and weaving what the last person said in with what you're saying. And you can play with multiple people or 2 people, multiple rounds or a few rounds with variable time lengths, turn lengths and so forth. But there's something that they were looking at, trust and betrayal. And that's typically the way that we look at trust is trust and betrayal. Those are the kind of polars. I had somebody else who named that the pole of trust is control. And that's an interesting pole. It's a different flavor to it, but control is the lack of trust. I must have order. And so that I don't trust you could be, I don't believe that you're going to allow me to control the situation as much as I would like to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And there's something about a vulnerability to even naming that, right? It can feel like an accusation, but it's actually probably, who knows what it probably is, but it's possibly a revelation about my own internal state. Like, oh, I feel unsteady in this moment. So I don't know exactly how to trust the moment, trust you in the moment.
I was just talking to a close friend of mine last night, and he was saying that there's a sense that for a lot of people, it's not that they're going towards what they want, it's they're going away from what they don't want. And those don't necessarily equal the same thing. It's like, I'm afraid, I'm uncomfortable, so I'm trying to go away from those things. Doesn't necessarily shoot you in the direction of what you want.
Right. Yeah, I was talking to a friend who, in an energetic state, kind of seems like they could be and the image that came to mind to me in the moment was like a bird inside a house. So like a wild bird inside a house might run into windows trying to get out, right? Like just trying to get away from something. Or the other image that comes to mind is, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's funny and tragic at the same time. A cat that gets a plastic bag stuck around their hind leg and tries to run away from the bag, and the bag is cheese.
Yeah.
It's just it's sad to laugh at, but it's
Right.
kind of funny. And it's like, oh, if you could just stop and look at what you're running from, you see that it's not really.
And a funny tangible example of this is like me being sleep deprived right now. I went to sleep at like 5 or 6 a.m. or something ridiculous. And then, so there's a part of me that's like, oh, I need to find good things to say. And it wasn't necessarily there, our first podcast. And so I'm like kind of noticing it feels like in my stomach area, like there's like some kind of anxiety or stress or pressure to say something good, say something like, oh, people would entertain people or give them thoughts or something. And then when I catch that, I'm like, oh, no. The more I try to force it, like, again, I was having a conversation with my friend last night. It's like anytime we try to force a joke, it never lands. Nobody's landing or nobody's laughing. And anytime where there's just like this excitement of something to say, it's like more, and it's a gift to everybody. It's just like something's moving through me rather than like, look at me, look how well I'm going to say this point. So it's like a relaxing I can go into and just like, I'm going to trust that this podcast is going to be all right without me trying. Yeah. Words are going to come through me. I've met plenty of like really smart people. I can just like repeat a lot of what they said, kind of riff off you, trust you. So there's like a trust in like things will flow.
Yeah. It is funny. I catch myself often doing that. What's the intelligent or wise thing that I could say? What's the provocative thing that I could say?
Right.
And yeah, it's ironic. If you've ever, I don't know, have you played with improv? You probably.
Oh yeah, every Tuesday.
Yeah. I've not done a lot, but I've done a little bit. And my wife played improv a while back. And me not taking the course with her, not being trained in it, I watched it, and there was an invitation for spouses or family to come up and play as well in a live situation. And I realized how hard it is for me to avoid attempting to be funny.
Yeah,
it's like that gets in the way, and I could even watch other people do it and recognize, wow, what they said was very plain, and the plainness of what they said was what made it funny. It's not the absurd that like there's some weird thing, that absurd thing, or the wise thing that's like, oh, I'm gonna drop this bombshell.
It's almost like the struggle of surviving on stage is funny for the audience. Like there's like the closer to somebody is into flow and creativity, it's just funnier. Like we play this game where if during the act one of us laughs because what the other person said was like just really hilarious, we have to justify it as if the character laughed in our play. Like if I laughed and I'm the dad of this daughter that just said something really ridiculous, I have to actually like justify, why did the father just laugh just then?
Yeah.
And it would be like really horrible moments, like we're going into dark things, and I would just laugh at the darkness of it. It's just like I have to come up with something of like, oh, somebody just sent me a meme. I just had a brain fart there.
Yeah. There is something funny about there's another notion of trust here that I've been noticing recently that is like this. There's something improv can be flirtatious in a way, flirtatious with the moment, right? Flirtatious with something. But there's also something flirtatious between people that feels really vulnerable. But I was interacting with somebody the other day, and we noted there's kind of a flirtatiousness that's happening on its own. I'm not trying to flirt, but it's just happening. Like there's something, and it feels slightly embarrassing, but also feels good. It's a weird in between space, and it feels like it comes about in a moment of like there is a kind of a deep trust. There's a deep trusting the moment enough to be vulnerable and let something be seen. In fact, we commented on the fact that it was almost like, wow, it was reminiscent of like a junior high sleepover where we're whispering in the dark about things that aren't normally talked about.
Yeah.
Something of noticing, like, yeah, this is a moment that I can actually share the thing that I didn't know that I could ever talk about with anybody, and it's okay
Right.
here. It's fascinating to feel what that sensation feels like. I am, what I notice mostly is I feel it in my belly in a way that, I feel a little bit of it now, and it feels a bit like, the feeling that your belly has going down on an elevator or on a roller coaster, that whoa. But if you slow it down and kind of freeze that, it has kind of a warmth to it, kind of a glow. It just feels like, oh, a pleasant fullness. It's not alarm. It's just like joy.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting noticing that it's just a slight different vibration of a similar.
Yeah.
Feel troubling in another moment.
What I noticed this week, I was just really thinking about value, like wanting to matter. The week before I was just really thinking about oneness, getting like trying to meditate in a way to feel the oneness with everybody. And I'm not a very spiritual person. I'm speaking more practically, of getting my brain to realize that, we're all here for each other. Whether it's true or not, it just feels good to think that, have my reticular activation system only see the people that are giving to me and love me and stuff like that. But then I was thinking about mattering. And so there's like a way that I was trying to tap into this oneness feeling where, okay, we're all equal. I don't have to like stand out. I don't have to do anything. It's just, I'm loved. But then I started thinking like, there's a way that does feel like some people are loved a bit more, or they get a bit more attention or something. And I think in that's like the value of my ego. It's like what it's really trying to say is like, hey, I really want to matter. I really want to be loved. But if I try to like do it forcefully, try to take your love, then it's just like, ugh, that's like trying to be funny in improv, or it's like me trying to sound cool on this podcast.
Yeah.
Or trying to control or manipulate a date or something like that.
Right.
There's a way it's like, for some reason, people, at least in our circles, really love vulnerability. And it's just kind of strange, like showing my belly, almost showing my throat and saying, I have anxiety or I have these things. There's like a way people relate. And I always talk about it like as a metaphor. It feels like a lot of people are marching through mud, and it's like a really hard fight. And then there's like a river right next to them that if they jumped in, it would just take them to right where they want to go. And I could sense it. I think when people are tapped into that flow, there's a magnetism, dancing on the dance floor, like completely loose, like a madman. There's a way that people are like, whoa, I want to be near this.
Yeah, it's there's something in the ironic nature of of letting go finally, or lets you arrive at the place that you're trying to get, right? That slog, that the harder you slog, the farther away you get from where you want to be. For me, it's almost ironically that the irony is almost a lifelong thing. Like it's, I have felt most of my life like I'm out of sync with the times. Never the cool kid, but it doesn't matter too much. I don't really care that much about being the cool kid. Right. And every once in a while, when it did seem like I was the cool kid for the moment, I would almost always mess it up because it was like, don't make me the cool kid. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I can't handle the pressure of being the cool kid.
Right. That's the trickiest part, because most likely you got into the cool kid zone. People saw you as the cool kid because you tapped into a flow, and people are like, keep going, keep going. You're like, and then that's where ego wants to come in and be like, okay, I have to keep forcing this. And it's like, no, that's not how we got here in the first place.
Exactly. How to keep the accident going.
Yeah.
Just on the edge. There's a piece here that is coming to mind, and I'm not sure exactly why. It is a piece that surprised me, which is in the past, it's probably been 2 years, but it's really heated up a lot lately. I've noticed a kind of addiction to resentment, which is an odd addiction to find myself in, like cultivating situations in which there are subtle misunderstandings and people get mad at me for not being clear about something. And an example, this was a really beautiful example. It was a place where it became really clear exactly what I was doing. I was on a road trip with somebody, and we were cooking for breakfast, and she put some water on the stove to warm it up, and I asked, "Oh, did you put enough water in there for me to have coffee as well?" And her response sounded defensive at first, and it surprised me. I didn't accuse you of anything. Oh, but I did say something I could have said more clearly, like it didn't occur to me to do this, but I could have said, "Oh, I want some coffee too. Is there enough water, or should I add some?" Which is like clearly taking like, oh, I didn't say anything about wanting coffee, but I do. Are we good, or do I need to do something to change it? Right.
Right.
Instead of like, oh, hey, did you take care of me? It's like, It's not my job to take care of you. And it's like, oh, I didn't mean that, but somewhere in me, it feels like there's a trickster that's trying to trip me up by wanting people subtly to take care of me. And then being mad that they don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, who's driving? Who's in charge of this vehicle that subconscious baiting of contested situations arises, the way that I ask questions. And she also commented during this trip, I notice when you get nervous, you mumble more, and I have a hard time understanding you. And it's like, you're right, I do that. And I also use funny words. I use a non-standard word in a sentence. And it's like, that's really strange. That it speaks to a different kind of trust. Like there's a habit that feels comfortable and yet doesn't get the result that I think that I want, but is repeatable enough that I don't change it. And it's like, that's something worth looking at. It's really uncomfortable to point the lens back at myself and say, what is it that I'm trying to get in this moment? How can I let go of the feeling of needing to be right? Or
yeah. It's like I had to learn the hard way that anything I shove into my shadow will come back out. Like, oh, I don't want to want things from people. I don't want to be taken care of or something, that's going to come back to bite me.
Yeah.
It's just going to accidentally say things. I'm like, huh.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to re-listen to the last podcast that we did
I
talk.
can't re-listen to my own voice. I'm gonna
Okay,
judge
yeah.
myself. I know it. It's yeah.
Talk about that aspect of, oh, hey, we've talked about some stuff that might, like awareness. Oh, this could be triggering for somebody, right? We could be talking about stuff that will cause somebody to they're talking about victim story and stuff. This is kind of a second order layer of trust, right? This first layer of do I know what I really want? Am I acting in accordance? Do I trust the situation enough to let go of control?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second is, can I trust my higher order functions in the universe to provide me with what I need? And it's fascinating to me. This is something that is coming up these days because of discussions around cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and NFTs and all of that, and whether is this global virus going to do anything to destabilize currencies, the fiat currencies, and do we need to take alternative methods, and or is the cryptocurrency and all of that just a scam that's people are using to try to bring people in? It's like, how do I make a good choice here? How do I actually notice where am I just running away from what I don't want rather than cultivating what I do want? Like really listening to, how does this work? And how do I learn to cultivate my vulnerability with other people in a way that feels good ongoingly?
This is so complex because in a way it's a gamble, and some people have gambling addictions. Some people probably need to gamble more.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a way it's like, oh, I want to have guarantees with crypto. I've invested in crypto. I want to have guarantees with it. And I'm like, it's just not going to happen. I'm not going to have that guarantee. And that's scary in a way. Okay, so is it scary in a way where I'm like, well, just don't invest anything at all and, do the guarantee? Like, will I regret that decision? In a way, there's still something bad that could happen.
Yeah.
I could regret my decision. I could see all my friends that invested in crypto get really rich, and then I'm left behind. And, not that financials really matter with friends, at least the ones I have. But there's like a way it's like, oh, damn, I might regret stuff if I just take the comfortable road. So that means it's not completely the comfortable road.
Yeah. Yeah. Be mindful. A lot of these thoughts are things I've thought of and it's played out in my mind to some extent. I even had some conversations about, I haven't had this one with you, but there's money is a particular odd thing. Like it's something I've wondered about, and crypto gives a good reason to wonder about it. It's really wakes up our wondering what actually is money. This is it's something that was easy to take for granted that's becoming harder to take for granted now. So
Yeah.
it's like I have to worry about it in a way that I didn't used to have to worry about it or think about it, give it concern.
Mm-hmm.
But something in this moment, in this transition, as we look at it, I thought money is a kind of social hormone. It's similar to dopamine. It is the way the collective pays attention to what is habit forming, right?
Yeah.
It is a kind of a way of watching the flow of energy through the collective.
Yeah.
In the way that dopamine kind of is a flow of energy through my body of whether a habit is giving me the results that I want or not.
It's like dopamine or money would be dopamine.
Yeah.
And then society would be the body with all the cells.
Yeah.
The cells get more, which kind of like is, of course, if a company's getting more money, then they're getting more power in society, and it's becoming more of it's like there's a fluid exchange.
Right. And it seems like as you're doing that makes sense. But we also know that we can get foolish with that habit forming, chasing that good feeling.
Yeah.
If it's too good, like cocaine or something like that, then it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm over choosing something that has a short-term benefit or short-term good feeling that has a hangover or a long-term regret.
See, this is interesting because I was thinking of the more money you're making, the more success. And then I think you're bringing in this point of not necessarily.
Right.
Do you shun all of your friends and loved ones and end up alone because of this focus on career and money?
Right. Well, and one of the things that stands out to me are the people who are willing to compromise their values.
Right.
Like, oh, I don't, it's a question as I look at it, how much of conventional funding now starts to resemble a Ponzi scheme? Is it really sustainable? And if that's the case, the last person holding the bag is the biggest fool. And there's something about that, as we're at a place where we have to worry about climate impacts and whether we're making choices for the long term. Like what are the prospects for our children? It's interesting. There's enough of an age difference between us that I'm aware my children are like 22 and 25. And they're looking at the cost of an education, raising a family, trying to buy a house. And they're like, that's not that part of the American dream is no longer alive for me to even consider. Like I can rent and try to eke out an existence, but I'm not going to be able to buy a home. That's not going to be feasible.
Right.
And so there's something of what do we do about that? How do we that's and it's interesting because people of my generation and older are like, oh, well, it's easy. You just work hard and save, and it's just easy.
Yeah.
So, y'all picked all the low-hanging fruit. There's none left. It doesn't look the same from this perspective.
It's also interesting because I recognized this during college, but I was thinking it's not just working hard, it's also working smart, and not only the hard workers get chosen to be promoted. It's like good communication skills that would allow things to be easier. Being able to write emails well, put PowerPoints together, even if you're not really working that hard on it, it's just you have some valuable skills. It's also thinking of my friend. He works for Firefly, the rocket company.
Yeah.
And they're talking about how, one of the richest men is suing them. And it's a great business move to sue. Say, hey, like this is something that they could easily win, but they'd have to like Firefly could easily win, but they'd have to pour a lot of funding into winning this battle, and that would take away their funding from the rocket, which would make it so that the person would still win. So just going to make the other person just get rid of a lot of money, lose all their funding. So it's like a great business move, but then in a sense, there's a way of, if I were to do that move, I'm like, this makes sense and I'll be first, I'll make more money or something. But it's like my heart won't be fully in the decision, that kind of decision.
Yeah. This is one of the places where at the scale that we're playing this global economics game, certain moves that we can make actually weaken the ecosystem. They look like they make the economy stronger, but weaken the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's close to, I imagine, what it's like when someone who's really addicted to a substance or to a behavior has to face the rock bottom. Oh, short-term gain of this feels really good or like necessary, but long-term, it's going to be harder to sustain this. Like, I'm not going to be able to continue doing this for much longer. And there's something in that.
And I think somebody who would make a great point, but about, doing a company that would hurt the environment but increase the economy, is they could also say, hey, we're not going to hurt the environment as much as these people. And if we don't make a lot of money, these people will win, and then it'll hurt the environment more. And so do I hold on to my values of saying, no, I'm going to do everything green, and then I end up losing and just becoming bankrupt? So that means I lose and the world loses. Or do I do something that's as green as possible while still winning, so that this non-green company won't win?
Right.
And then, but a lot of it is probably selfish in that I'm going to advertise my company as green so I can make more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's all just like really complex. And I think there's a lot of people that are wanting to, like, hey, let's set our emotions aside and really figure this out. But it's just so complex. And I think a lot of people give up from that state because it's like, man, this is really complex. It's really hard to figure out. And I think there's a lot of people that are like, no, it's simple. And then they have a lot of anger and passion. Just be a green company, kind of ignoring the fact that, like, I don't know how to do that and have a successful business. Well, stop liking success. Yeah. It's like, well, that's not going to help the world.
Right.
So it's all just really, it's all really, like, really complex.
And there's something about feeling set up in a way, like having a non-winnable choice. Like you said, there's that example of, if I don't care enough to make the money, then I don't make an impact. And if I do, it's like set up in such a way that the choice that I end up making is not what I really want to do. I'm actually having to compromise my values. I'm actually having to cut into who I am, to compromise with myself on my values in order to try to be impactful. And I do wonder, it does seem like, as I back up, I wonder if it's possible to simplify it. I wonder, I don't have a good answer on this yet. If it's possible to simplify it such that being true to my values and supporting other people and being true to their values is more important. There was a situation. I know someone who was in a court case around foreclosure on their house because of the 2008 housing crisis collapse. And the lawyers were really good at playing games. Looking at the legal form, it's right for us to take your house away, even though if you actually look at it, it's kind of a crazy thing. The law is clearly in the wrong in this case. It's legal. This is the legal thing, but it's unethical or immoral, right? The law is immoral. And it's like, what do you do when it's clear that what is legal is clearly bad for us?
Yeah. Because it is interesting, because the whole point of the law is to kind of figure out, how do we go towards the most ethical purpose? And yeah, it's just weird when it's taken advantage of.
So I'm curious. I think that's the common conception, and I have a little bit of a pushback challenge on: is it really how do we live the most ethically, or is it more how do we eliminate the possibility that people will take the law and take the trying to equalize things into their own hand and put it in the hands of the state to mediate for them, and trying to come up with a set of rules that we can follow that make that works to some extent, but it always is, the reality is always more complex than the code that we write to try to describe that situation. It's an interesting thought, and it gets a little bit I'm not sure. I'm gonna trust your judgment on this and whether this feels alive or too complex. There's something like, even as I'm paying attention to, one of the things I'm interested in is biology and how biology works. Like when I look at what goes on inside of a cell, the number of processes that happen reliably is very complex. And that DNA, thought of as computer code, is a bad metaphor because it does something way more complex than deterministic instruction. It's a much more fluid, interactive kind of a thing. It's taking context into example in every case. And it's clear that our legal structures don't take context into account as well as it really ought to. So that's where I start to become curious. Is there a way that we can change that? Is there a way that we can recognize that fallacy and include a kind of legal structure that takes context into account better than what we have currently?
Right. And I think what's cool about the law is like, I remember learning about single cell organisms where it was, I don't know if it was the first life, but where there'd be these tiny cells that kind of go around eating something, I'm not sure what. And then all of a sudden there are these larger cells just kind of, I guess, swimming probably in the ocean or something. I don't know too much about this, but there'd be these like larger cells that would eat the smaller cells. And then as these smaller cells were declining, suddenly they banded together and it'll be a multi-cell organism. And the multi-celled organism would start eating the larger organism. In a way, it's like similar to Neanderthals. Like Neanderthals were better than us in every way. Why did they get extinct? Well, it's probably because they were more solo than us. And so it's kind of cool because I think more and more as society develops, geek culture is on the rise. And so there's like a funny thing about that. I think a lot of people are talking about like, why is geek culture on the rise? Or like it's a new era where individual single power, muscular power, where I can just say, I'm going to take your lunch money, is no longer relevant. You know, we have more anti-bullying in schools and things like that, where it's just, you can't just take what you want.
Yeah.
Which is where the law comes in. It's like, hey, we're going to be a multi-celled organism. We're going to be the whole country. I don't think you can fight the whole country for stealing some kind of vase from your neighbor or something.
Yeah.
You know, we got an army and all that.
Yeah. So here's where it kind of gets interesting. One of the conversations that I'm talking with people about has to do with the redevelopment of the commons and blockchain and other distributed hash table type solutions. These kind of ledger agreements where what is agreed upon is everybody can look at. It doesn't take the same kind of legalese. Like it kind of makes the need for lawyers a little bit less. It's a little bit oversimplified. It's still pretty complex, and so you have to have some ability to know what's going on. But because that's possible to have a more decentralized agreements that don't require as much overhead as a legal structure, it's possible to do some interesting things with the commons that allow us to make agreements that, I mean, because one of the forms of I'm just going to take your lunch money is, no, that's not what we said. What we agreed to is this other thing. You want to tell me I'm wrong? Take me to court, and I have enough money I can defend myself. I can hire a lawyer that will make you look bad, and I will win. And so there's something of the blockchain that makes that less feasible if we can band together in a way. Mm-hmm. And so there's something, but there's another aspect. So it feels a little bit messy in the way that I portrayed it. It's not the important part. I want to set that as just a hypothesis to be sorted out later. The real part that I'm interested in is noticing that the way that venture capitalists protect themselves, make good bets, is by having enough money to be able to make multiple bets, and hopefully one of them will become And if I invest in 100 companies and one of them goes insanely rich, then I've made my money back. And I can be choiceful enough to do that. I don't know which of the 100 is going to kind of pay off. As long as I'm reasonably careful about the choices that I make, one of them will. And I don't have to worry about that. But the employees that are working for those companies are making an all-in choice. If they happen to be working for one of the companies that doesn't go well, they lose out. And even though the venture capitalist makes a lot of money, he can walk away and say, he or she can want to walk away and say, I've recouped my thing, and all of the 99 that didn't, too bad for you, right? Mm-hmm. And there's something of the commons that makes it possible to mediate that a bit, right? You did good work at this company, you just chose the wrong company to work for, but I want to make sure that you're still compensated for contributing something that worked out. That this is kind of a notion of moving towards the thing I like versus away from the thing I don't like.
Yeah.
Familiar with the notion of hill climbing and valley crossing? That it's a term in trying to optimize your outcome. Hill climbing, there's a local maximum, right? You can only get to the certain height at that hill. If you want to get to a higher hill, you're going to have to cross over a valley somewhere to get to a higher hill. And so there's a painful thing, but it's also an investment of resources to go there. But investing resources to try to get higher on the hill that you're on is not a good idea. So the venture capitalist can make a bet in multiple things. It's kind of what Ferdinand and Isabella did with Columbus. Hey, we'll bet on a bunch of people, and look, one guy found America. Great, we get a lot of riches for that. A lot of other people sank their ships. Okay, well, that's treasure for somebody else for another day, but we didn't get that return. Right. And there's something about the ability to diversify in that way on risky bets that some of them are likely to pay off. That if we can participate in a way with blockchain, we can mediate the risk of that and make it such that these kinds of gambles are more affordable, like less risky for each of us, and better, and find new opportunities rather than sticking to just the same safer solution, which is not going to necessarily solve the problems.
Right. Yeah. There's something subtle I have on the tip of my tongue. There's a way that, going back to the power part. I'm trying to weave in what you just said, but it's really hard to. There's like something subtle here where there's a sense that feels like there's these different groups that are kind of popping up. So let's say right now, the US dollar, like it feels like a lot of power in the US dollar. And I think that there's people that sprout up and say, let's equalize this power. Let's come up with something to balance it. There's like, for instance, there's a way that a lot of men had power in Hollywood. And then all of a sudden this Me Too movement pops up. And there's a way that there's power in numbers of a lot of people speaking up. And so even though these men have like lots of money and power in how much they've networked and all of that, it's like they were powerless in front of this like huge force that just took on wildfire. And there's a way, it's like almost like any new group that comes up and just gains all this power, they're not going to 100% of the time use it morally. Right. There's going to be a couple immoral people. And then of that, like, then there's going to be another force that bands together to kind of equalize and balance the power. It just keeps on happening.
Right.
But there's a way that if that's only like really scary if it is me versus you. Right. If it is like, okay, we're in some kind of two groups and I'm placing all my bets in my group. This is where I'm weaving in your point. I'm placing all my bets in my group and you're placing all your bets in your group. It's kind of like me versus you. Only one can win. But if there's a way where I can just say, I think you have a great point, and I want to honor that. I also want to honor my own point. Then it's like we're on the same side, and something integrates,
Right.
like the people there. I think we're a lot of men that were afraid of Me Too and saying, hey, there's a way that people could just lie and say that something happened when it didn't.
Right.
And that would probably be rare, super rare, in my opinion.
Right.
But it's not zero. And then there's a way it's like, hey, I like that. And it's the best we got so far, where people have gotten away with rape and molestation for too long. And there's just not a great way to call that out and stop it from happening. And I think that that's important. And there's like a way it's like, oh, both can be integrated into something. It's like, oh, we're not on the opposite sides here. I imagine all the men that are like afraid of Me Too, like agree with like rape is terrible.
Right.
And this is
Right.
probably a really triggering subject.
It's a very, it is very, it's interesting. I saw someone posted on Facebook recently. The conversation went in a bunch of different ways, but the original post was effectively that random could use a random percentage, but actually it originally started as a specific percentage. 95% of people would be willing to give up all of their freedom for a little bit of safety. And and in a way, it's like, shame on them. That's really a bad choice, right? If you give up your freedom, you're not guaranteed of safety. The safety can be a fake safety or whatever. And it's attributed to Benjamin Franklin, who said something similar without the numbers, but was making a more subtle point. And there's the way that the conversation went was along those lines. And somebody had made the point that there's attributed to Jordan Peterson. I don't know where it originally came from, but strong men lead to good times leads to weak men lead to bad times, and bad times lead to strong men. So it's this cycle, right? It's a kind of a sine wave of this rise and fall of when we have too many good times, we get bad people. And it's interesting because there's a way of attributing it to good and bad that I think is misleading and challenging. So we could say the last century's power moguls, right? The Carnegies and Rockefellers, who could, robber barons, just make as much money as they wanted to and run companies the way they wanted to before there were unions. It was like, yeah, you're just a little guy. You can't actually speak up. And it's like, yeah, but there's a lot of us little guys, and we can band together, just like the organisms you're talking about, the cells banding together and becoming a multicellular organism. The union is like, and now that we are strong, we're going to make you pay for your earlier sins of taking advantage of us. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's not actually what we want. We don't want to reverse the trend and make the powerful always gaining the upper hand be punitive in their use of power. We want to find the way that I would like to find the situation that works regardless of which side I'm on. I'm wealthy and that benefits me, but it also doesn't harm the non-wealthy, or I'm not wealthy and I'm able to participate and find some useful way of doing that. So there's something of that sine wave notion that I think we can flatten the curve a little bit to make it less extreme and more balanced, but it requires a kind of a self-awareness about, again, I think this kind of comes back to the notion of trust and how we play with trust. It's not so much, one of the comments I made in the thread on that Facebook post was that almost every instance of projection that I engage in is because I'm afraid of looking at the fear that I have inside of me.
Yeah.
It's easier to project that the danger is out there than it is to look inside and see in what way am I contributing to this.
Right. I was thinking of this example of what you're talking about. Like, I like to go to parties where I don't know anybody. And there's a way that if I can be really good to somebody, there's a way that I can be giving of my attention and kind of relate with any person that is talking to me. Or just over time, people are like, man, it just feels really good around Shane. It's like I start to gain popularity in a sense. Like, people come back to me for this feeling, and other people are like, why are so many people surrounding this person. So it's kind of like there must be something there. He must be popular. But so it's like I'm giving. It's hard times, and I'm finding a way through it. I'm giving, and I'm getting rewarded for that. But then if I just keep coming to this party and then I just get used to it, and somebody new comes in, if I've just been on my throne the whole time, and they kind of just don't really give me much attention, maybe it might be that my ego might come out and be like, don't you know who I am?
Right.
And it's like, yeah, then it goes cycles back into bad times.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting to notice the way that all that plays out. Have you seen the movie In and of Itself? Derek
Yeah,
Audio? Yeah.
so good.
Very highly recommend that movie to anybody who hasn't seen it, as an exploration of identity and kind of some of these things. It reminded me because there's a story that he tells with that
I was
quote
thinking
comes
the
back.
same story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy, initially coming in suicidal, wanting to play Russian roulette, clicking the gun multiple times to his head and still surviving. Basically, people paying to go see him commit suicide because they're placing bets on if you die. And then he by some kind of miracle, he stayed alive. Just explaining for the audience. And then somebody breaks in to his home and points a gun at him. It's like, don't you know who I am? He's like, no. And just shoots him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting story because it's compelling in a way, but the way that the story is told, he's not sure how it's like it fits somehow, but how is that me? Like, yes, I recognize the pattern. How am I doing that? And how do I stop?
Right.
It's that's kind of like the same thing that I noticed with my resentment. Oh, here's this thing that I'm cultivating resentment, and I'm harvesting all the resentment that I'm cultivating. How do I stop planting resentment seeds? I don't want to do that anymore.
Right. And a lot of it just feels like we've been trained through experience of, especially for me with dating. I think dating is like a huge dopamine, and people get so many good feeling neurochemicals from dating but it's also this mystery box. Like, what are you supposed to do with dating? And I think over time, people are like just trying things in the dark, and then good things happen. And it's like, okay, repeat whatever I just did. And in that, it creates a personality, it feels like, creates a character. People have different values. Oh, every time I'm honest, something good happens. Or every time I feel, I get away with it. It could be good, it could be bad in some sense. But then a lot of us are like, don't take this away from me because I know it works.
Right.
And there's a way, it's like we could just start to let go. Oh, maybe there's another way. And when we let go, we can find more patterns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't want to let go. They're like, no, this is just what worked. Why not just stick with what worked? But it's like kind of like if somebody just creates a company or something, and they finally, through multiple failures, they come up with a company that went well, enough to like put food on their plate. Why start from scratch and take a risk to like make a company that's even better, or make some big decision that changes the company that's already working?
Right.
But at the same time, a lot of businesses die because they don't adapt. Like,
Right.
change is scary. This was working. Why isn't it still working? But times change, the environment changes, so this no longer works.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I'm more pro, but I don't have a strong attachment to the pro feeling that I have towards Elon Musk. But one of the things when I look at him and look at the way that he's looking at that same sort of thing, this is the valley crossing, right? It's recognizing standard manufacturing techniques and standard fuel techniques are at their tail end. Yes, they worked for a long time, but it doesn't take a genius to peer into a crystal ball to see that that's coming to an end.
Right.
Probably time right now, while there's still enough resources, to start investing in alternatives and figure out a good process for making that better, right? And it's very tempting for companies that are resting on, hey, don't you know who I am? I'm GM. I
Yeah.
invented this thing, right? I'm Ford. You think you're going to be better than me? I invented the assembly
Right.
line. And it's like, yeah, the assembly line is old technology now. It doesn't keep up with the times. The rate of change is bigger than that now.
It's also like there's a way that spiritual bypassing is in there somehow. Like, don't you know I'm
Mhm.
Ford? There's a way it's like if I say, hey, things are okay, which they are, whether or not my business succeeds or I become homeless and poor, things are going to be okay. But like in
Right.
another sense of no, no, I'm going to stay successful. I have to keep believing this or else I'm going to feel anxiety.
Yeah.
It's like bypassing to that kind of feeling and saying, no, this is going to be successful.
Right. Right. Yeah. The admission that what I have been doing may not continue to work
Right.
would be too devastating. I can't do that. And it's interesting. One of the reasons I like Elon Musk is because he, um, I'm also a little bit concerned about it because his ability to sort of apply that principle in a more than a rigorous, right, in a relentless way,
Mhm.
um, it means he can have a very high standard and he can set the direction. If there is a flaw with his operating system, if he's actually doing more harm than good, he might be successful anyway. Um, and I don't know. One of the things I don't know is, I mean, I like one of the approaches that, again, I can't tell like for sure how much this is true across the board, but he puts a lot of his technology into the public domain. Not all of it, but enough of it that it's like competition is more important. You know, and there was a recent interview with him where somebody from Forbes was interviewing him, and he asking, "What do you want to do with? What do you think the government should spend their money on? What do you think we should incentivize? You know, do we want to incentivize electric cars? Because I don't think we need any incentives. Take away all the incentives for electric cars and for oil and for all of that stuff. I don't think you need that. I mean, innovation works. Let's just do innovation. Let the government take care of some of the stuff, but really get them out of the. And it's an interesting kind of a mode to think about. It's so contrary to the current way of thinking that everyone is like, you're a crazy person. You're
Yeah.
obviously insane. But it seems like he's not insane. But if he's wrong, I don't know how to check his math.
Right. Right.
No one else knows how to check his math either, really. But I want more people to try.
Well, it's also, there's a way that we never expected, like a global pandemic that we'd be locked into our homes. And until it happened, and now it's like, oh yeah, of course, I've experienced it. So it's not surprising to me
Right.
anymore if another lockdown happens.
Right.
Whereas it would surprise people if electric took off and like just became the next big thing
Yeah.
on its own because we're not
Right.
used to it. And so there's a
Right.
way that like helping people see things they're not used to.
Yeah. This is a place where. Are you familiar with the rationalist community?
Yeah,
Yeah.
somewhat.
Uh, the less wrong and there are a couple of websites that are good. I'll link in show notes about sites that you can go and look at the rationalists. But they're also very good at looking at cognitive biases
Mm.
and logical fallacies, ways in which it's easy to trick oneself into believing that, oh no, everything is fine. Like recency biases, like, oh yeah, it happened. Like you said, I haven't seen electric cars take off, so I don't think they will. That's
Right.
that's a bad strategy, right? Um, and there are lots of ways that we can, if we're honest with ourselves, we can apply these and say, wait a minute, am I doing something that's actually decreasing my ability to predict my future by making bad choices that just feel good?
Yeah. There's a It's a cool thing. I don't know if this is Jordan Peterson that said it, but I think he did. There was something about him saying meta real. There's like archetypes, and there's these little things that keep playing over and over. It's funny to think about business in a spiritual way. There's like these themes that play out. For me, it's like noticing just through all movies and just a lot of my own life, like revenge never gets me what I want. That's a theme. And I'm just learning to trust this theme. It just keeps making sense. I don't end up being happy if I succeed. And most likely I lose a lot in the process of going for revenge. And there's a way that just feeling good and forgiving, whether or not this person apologized, whether or not it's still happening, like good things end up happening for me.
Mhm.
It's kind of funny in slightly a manipulative way. But just like a lot of times I would forgive somebody who's like yelling at me or angry, and then other people would band against that person, have an opposite of effect of what they were expecting because of my kindness.
Yeah.
And so it's funny in that, because I wouldn't necessarily mean to like punish this person, but punishment happens more when I'm not going for revenge.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I am, there's a curiosity here about whether there is uh, in what way can that sort of unintentional manipulation, um, or kind of auxiliary manipulation, how can that, is that work out well enough, often enough, or is there a way to really listen to some deeper aspect? This is something that I don't know if there's a clean answer for. Like,
Yeah.
the one thing that I've become more clear about is an important aspect of this trust, as I start to examine what trust means. It's like, I can't tell you what basis you should use for your own trust.
Yeah.
I can hear that and I think, oh, I wouldn't want to use manipulation techniques for me, and not that you're saying that you want to, but if there's an element of that, I would want to weed that out. And it's like, what in me is biased in that direction? That might be the better approach. I have an automatic knee-jerk reaction to it. Have I really examined what's underlying in that maybe I'm
Yeah.
allergic to? Maybe it's an allergy that would I would find some healing if I could stop reacting so knee-jerk to it.
Yeah. You know, Jordan, the one who's leading the company the circling company we both work for, like he likes to tell me that it's okay to caretake if I really look at my caretaker, my internal caretaker, and I like really heal the parts where I think, oh, I need to caretake to receive love, or I need to caretake because I can't take tension, you know, or I can't take conflict. If I just heal all those parts and just feel good, and then just say, well, I kind of want to caretake anyway,
Yeah.
and it's fine.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing it from a place of like, I need to solve what's happening, just has a different effect. So it's kind of, I think about that with manipulation, where it's like, I feel good about this, and then do it. I'm like, I really looked. I think this is moral. I think everybody wins. And yeah.
Yeah. The piece I've been looking more lately is, do I also take into account the impact that it had? This is
Right.
something that a lot of people say, well, my intent was, what I intended to happen was this. It didn't happen that way. You know, I made a bad judgment. And so, but my intention should count for something.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think
Well, yeah.
that's
And another
true,
good example
but not,
here. Go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, that's true, but not as much as we think, right? There's a tendency to think that my intention counts. I actually find myself doing it a lot where something bad happened. I said, well, I didn't know that was going to happen. It's like,
Yeah.
does it matter?
Right. Right. You know, in circling, there's a lot of this question kind of arises of, how do you feel now? Or how does your body feel? And sometimes this question goes really well. It's the person's kind of stuck in something. They're really thinking about something, and then it's like, well, where's your attention right now? Or how does your body feel?
Yeah.
And it just goes really well. Oh, thank you for that question. Now I can look inside, kind of like share what's going on for me, feel more relaxed now that I'm like aware of my breath. But then there's a way that people ask it where they're like, God, I'm so tired of how this person's talking. Like, I want them to relax so I can relax. So let me ask them, where's your attention right now? And there's like a little bit of a tone of, you're doing something wrong right now, and I want you to be different. And it does not go well.
Yeah. Yeah. It is funny because it's like the words are there. And I may not, the tricky part is, if I were the one who was doing that, ask that in a way that something didn't go bad, I may not even be aware that I was annoyed.
Right.
I can actually notice, I can almost notice in hindsight, oh, it acted as if they were defensive. Was I attacking? Oh, I was annoyed. Did that get through? I bet it did. I bet it was something that I caught in myself, subtle ways in which I was shooting invisible barbs at people, not knowing it, thinking that I was being a good person. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm not good enough to prevent some part of my ego from slipping a little barb in it occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like good parts to stop.
Yeah. It's like I'd be interested in the arc of where we went to today.
This is great.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you again, Shane.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Look forward to doing another one of these soon.
Same.
All right.
I'm excited.